much, would you still call what you felt for your job love?
Stack your coins and build your life on your own terms.
Does anyone truly love work?
I would definitely go back if I had to. First choice, absolutely not.
Do you think about leaving?
I have the fortunate opportunity to make money, basically to learn.
Every week.
Be honest, is it harder?
I don't know if it's harder.
There is no perfect place.
I think it just requires more discipline.
Once you realize it's not a game you can win,
You work because you have to.
like they tell you, pay your dues. There's no winning in this game. The best way to win is to cash out.
There's so much more to money than saving it, spending it, and making it grow. So we're digging deeper and exploring all the topics we only scratched the surface on in our book to uncover how money really affects our lives. I'm Julien.
And I'm Kiersten, but most people know us as Rich and Regular. Maybe you've seen us on social media, read about us, or we popped up on your TV one day.
The Saunders are rewriting the rules to achieving financial freedom.
We're writers and creative entrepreneurs on a mission to inspire better conversations about money. Welcome to Cashing Out, the podcast.
Walking away from a good job can feel like more than just closing a chapter in your life. Sometimes it can feel like the death of an identity. So it's no wonder so many people hesitate, never do it, or wait until the decision to leave is made for them.
What if the grass isn't greener? How will I pay for healthcare? And what if I fail? Those were just some of the questions running through our minds before leaving the comfort and stability of a good job. And when you leave to pursue entrepreneurship, it can feel even scarier.
So we asked a few people who've done it to help us understand how they overcame that fear, or if the fear ever goes away. Meet Anthony and Janelka Hartzog. He's a former corporate employee turned full-time entrepreneur, where he now runs a hands-off cleaning business and teaches others how to start their own. She's a mental health therapist and as of early 2023 works on a family business part-time. They built this while they were both employees and have since grown it to over $500,000 in revenue.
Meet Chris. He's a personal finance expert, media personality, and host of the Popcorn Finance podcast, where he explains financial concepts in about the time it takes to make a bag of popcorn. Prior to this, he worked as an analyst and payroll manager until making the decision to pursue his passion full-time.
Sure, because Anthony, you left corporate, but Janelka, you haven't, right?
I have not. I'm still there.
Yeah, I left a year ago,
Okay.
pretty much this week.
December 18th.
Oh,
December
wow.
18th, next week.
Okay.
Congrats. Yeah, happy anniversary.
Would you ever go back? And like, what if so? Like, what would the circumstances have to be like for you to like consider going back to a traditional corporate job?
I can't say I wouldn't ever go back.
Right.
If things came to it and I had to pick up and do what I had to do for the family, yeah, I would definitely go back. Is that my first choice to go back? Absolutely not. So would I go? I would absolutely go back if last resort we had no more savings, we're getting to the end, or she's like, listen, we getting kind of close.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
If it came to that, I would definitely go back if I had to. First choice, absolutely not.
Yeah. Janelka, what's keeping you there? Do you think about leaving?
Every week. Because it's funny, we get 3 months off from work because we just had the baby this year. And then I went back and then I took 3 months personal leave, which means that I had to use my PTO and then I didn't get paid. And so it was kind of for me testing out what that would look like if I did leave. Originally, like years ago when we spoke about leaving, I would say that the job was connected to my identity because I'm a mental health therapist. So I got my master's, I got licensed, I'm licensed in New York and Texas, and I'm like, I ain't giving this up.
Yeah.
But now I think about it as people, they will always need therapists, so I can keep up my license. I can always go back to work if needed. And definitely as a therapist, you can work, how many hours you want to work. So what keeps me, I think because I've been working from home since we moved down to Dallas for the past 6 years. So it's not taking too much out of me.
Right.
But the part that takes out of me is having to be at a computer 8 hours a day. So then I can't move. I can't do anything until 5 o'clock, or if I'm taking a lunch, those type of things that I have to wake up really early to go to the gym, or I have to go after work. And then that's cutting into the time with Alani because she's going to bed at 7 p.m. So those things kind of, I do go back and forth on. But I say what keeps me is the fact that it doesn't feel like it's taking too much.
Yeah.
But I do understand that if I wasn't at work, we probably can be further as well. So it's kind of like a seesaw in my head.
No, I was the exact same way.
Yeah.
I was the exact same way. And it took Bo, our son, being older and the demands of motherhood just like becoming too much.
No,
that was my personal experience.
That wasn't just
like,
it was that, and it took an org change.
Oh yeah, there was that too.
And a leadership change, or sort of like the freedoms and the comfort that she'd enjoyed were basically taken away from her. You know how
I think about that too. Right. And that reminds me of what Anthony used to say. He's like, people leave their managers, they don't leave their job.
Oh yeah, I was really nervous and hesitant to step away. Like, it was never my dream to work for myself. Like, it never was on my radar. Even after I started the podcast and I saw people doing it, I was never like, oh yeah, I want to do that. I was like, no. I actually have a physical reaction to hearing people use the word entrepreneur. I don't know what it is, but it's always like, I mean, come on, everybody's not an entrepreneur. I know you're not. I know what you do. You're not an entrepreneur. You're just doing a side hustle. But it's not something I ever wanted. And I don't know why I never leaned into it. Or even now, I still don't even really refer to myself as that. I'm doing something I enjoy doing, and I'm just fortunate enough to get paid to do it. But I really love the people I work with, and I know how rare that is. And I think that's what caused a lot of my hesitation. Prior to my last job, I was working as an analyst for local government in Southern California. And prior to that, I'd been running payroll departments for like 7 years. And payroll is a life-sucking job. Like, I know a lot of people, other people who run payroll departments, there's probably people listening to this who probably do the same thing. And it's just every 2 weeks, you're doing the exact same thing over and over. It never changes. You get the same questions every year. People are angry when you make one small mistake, and they don't care that you've been doing great for 6 months. And so if I would have been in the position to leave when I was doing that job, I might have left. I might have been a little more eager to get out of there. Plus, I was in like the job right before the one I left. It was a toxic environment. Like, I'd only been there about 4 years, and I was like one of the most senior people in the department because so many people left because the environment, people just hated it. They were treating the staff poorly. There's a lot of just like weird ego stuff going in. You know how you get where someone ends up in a job, they don't really know what they're doing, but they got a big ego, so they're not going to admit it. So then they start treating other people who try to tell them what they're doing wrong. It was just horrible situation.
Yeah.
So when I landed in my last job, these were people who I had worked with previously, and they had left, gone to other organizations. We just stayed in contact, and they reached out to me. It's like, hey, we have this opening. We think you'd be great for this. Are you interested? And I was like, yes, I am. So I get there, and it's just a whole different environment. Like, it's almost like when you're in trauma every day, you don't really notice how bad it is. You're just like, man, work just sucks. And then you get to a new place, and it's completely different. They treat people with fairness and kindness. They respect each other. You're like, oh, this is how it should have been every day. I had no idea people were living like this. So I didn't take it lightly, the idea of leaving that, because I knew how hard it was. I worked for years in places I didn't want to be. So to finally find myself somewhere I felt respected and valued, paid well, it was not something I took lightly. And it took me a long time to come to the decision to finally step away. But I don't regret it, but I do still value that experience, and don't take it lightly, and don't think. That's why I would never be like, oh yeah, just go ahead and quit your job and do your own thing. Because no, if you got a good thing going, there's nothing wrong with staying there and enjoying those benefits.
Earning potential aside, what were like the motivations behind why you decided to kind of walk away and kind of pursue your entrepreneurial interests full time?
So when we were able to pay off our debt, that was like the first inclination. Like, you said earning potential aside, but that was the first step that was like, yo, we can make as much money as we want outside of our jobs.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
Picking up other jobs. And when we started our business, we got to the point where we said, if we're able to at least meet my salary or meet our salaries halfway, we leave our jobs. And we kind of kept pushing it. Oh, let's do 3/4 and let's do the full way. And then we got the full way. And then it said, all right, let's do the full way for 2 years. And the goalpost just kept getting further and further away.
Yeah.
And I think the pandemic, and then also me losing my best friend in my job, like he passed away from sickle cell. I kind of lost a part of my love for the job, and a big part of my identity at my job was my team. So I was able to build up, we had one manager in Dallas. I built this up to having 3 managers, I built up our entire team of just one person to about 35 people that worked under me directly. I got everybody the salaries they wanted. I got everybody the compensation, the vacation packages, the everything that they wanted for my office, and all. I got my minorities in there. And at that point, it's like, I don't see myself doing anything else here. I was like, I don't love the job anymore. I love the people, and I got everybody else what they wanted. Now it's time for me to pursue, what I want. And, it took her. We said in 2021 at the beginning, we said, all right, if this is our last year, let's start having those conversations more seriously. So the beginning of 2021, we do our annual, family meeting. And we said, this is a goal for this year, this to be the last year. And let's take it more seriously. So those were the steps that we really took before end of 2021 came, and we said, it's a wrap.
Yeah. And then just the freedom of it all, really. I think we really enjoyed the time that I was off this year, even though it was, obviously for our new baby. We were traveling like crazy.
The first 3 months.
Freedom, the first 3 months, not so much. It was adjusting to the baby. But when I took the personal leave recently, we were literally traveling like crazy. So that freedom that it allows to not be at the 9 to 5 has been enjoyable as well. Was part of the decision of walking away and being able to put more of our energy into our own businesses.
We've already talked about like what makes you guys so confident, but why do you think so many of the other people out there who really want to make that leap struggle to kind of make the actual transition? What do you think it is?
I think it's twofold. I think one has to do with upbringing and society. We speak about that with our friends, like not going to college wasn't an option. I'm not saying my mother said you must go to college, but you didn't think of anything else. I don't know how to explain it. It just
college or bust.
It's just like high school and then college. There was no other option out there. So I think that if we knew more when we were younger and growing up of the other possibilities outside of college, then we'll feel a bit more comfortable. It's just what it is in society. Now, with our children growing up, they may not even think about 9 to 5. They may not think about college. I don't know, because it's a whole different playing field right now of different options out there. That's one part of it. And then the second part is just being comfortable. That consistent or guarantee, I say guaranteed because you can get fired anytime, unless you're like at a government or union job, but that consistent guaranteed income coming in keeps you there. Right. And so we speak about that entrepreneurship is getting paid $10,000 one month, $50,000 one month, negative $6,000 another month. Like, so you have to be comfortable with that it may not be as consistent as your 9 to 5. And I think that comfortability of that structure of what work looks like and getting paid something once you do it keeps people there.
So now that you are on the other side, or I should say this side, because there are probably these days more than
there's
just
more
two
than
sides,
two sides.
right?
Yeah, there's a spectrum of entrepreneurship and self-employment.
Yeah, is it as hard as you thought it would be?
I don't know if it's harder. I think it just requires more discipline than harder per se, because you can move at your own beat. Generally, I guess it depends on what type of entrepreneur you are. The things that you're doing, you like, you enjoy it. So it doesn't feel as difficult. Now there's things that you may not know nothing about, content, editing, just different things like that. But I won't say that it's harder. It's just more discipline, and you need to put the structure in your life versus a job or a college telling you to be somewhere at a certain time. So that may be a bit harder for people that need that.
That's a good question, because I wouldn't describe it as hard in the kind of like the emotional weight of work, because I was used to the constant grind. I'd be at work late different times of the year where it's like, this is going to be a rough part of the year. You're going to be working extra time just because this is what it takes to get it done. You're going to be up at a certain hour. You're going to be here. You're going to work until a certain hour. You're going to leave. Like, it's that rigid constraint that is a typical 9 to 5. Switching from that and coming to something with so much more freedom, that's why I wouldn't describe it as hard in that sense, but it's hard in the sense that you're it. Like, that's it. It stops with you.
I think it's harder than I thought it would be, because the structure part of it was very difficult for me, because I'm a very regimented person, meaning I went to my job, I wake up, go to the gym, go to my job, come back, and then we work on our businesses. So I knew between hours of 5 to 10, that was our working on business hours, or 5 to 7 working on business or working on family and things like that. So now I have a full day which could be from 7 to 5 or 7 to 3 or even 7 to 10, whatever it may be. And trying to figure out that structure is still very difficult for me.
And that's a whole other type of pressure that I wasn't familiar with. You know, if you go to work and you have a rough day, you're not feeling well, you got stuff going on at home with family, you can kind of zone out a little bit. You can just be like, well, whatever, you know, I'm here. That's all that matters. I'll do enough so that people won't come looking for me, and then I'll go home. But when it's all on you and you're not feeling well emotionally, especially like with mental health type of things, like if you're like down, like there's been moments where I felt like just like depressed and like I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to see anyone. In those moments, that's when I find it the hardest, especially because I do something so visible now to where when I don't feel like talking to someone, I don't have the option of just checking out and just sticking to myself. I got to do something. And you got to kind of find that zone to get yourself to where you can be present and look like you're enjoying yourself, even though inside you're like, I hate this. I don't want to be here right now.
So, and that's one thing I talk to people about all the time. And they're always saying, oh, there's this book, here's this resource. But I have to figure out how to structure my day on my own versus having my job tell me how to structure my day. So I think that's what makes it more difficult for me.
And I find that to be the hardest part of doing this work on my own and running my own, I guess you call it business, because it's just a whole other level of responsibility and pressure and just like expectation that you don't have when you have a day job.
There's an ongoing debate about which path is best. On one hand, there's the freedom and glamour of being self-employed, and on the other is the proven and predictable grind of a 9-to-5 job. But not everyone walks away from a job to start a business or a side hustle. Meet Erica. We first met her when she was employed at a popular tech company, and she asked us to come speak to their employee resource group for Black History Month.
She's an advocate and follower of the FIRE movement and has her own ambitions to walk away from corporate life and retire early. Her dream of cashing out of her lucrative tech career eventually came true, but her path? Well, we'll let her tell the story.
I remember when we first connected and we got the email from you and you were asking us to speak to your company, the ERG, which we always love doing. You mentioned, do you remember how you described the employees?
I did. I remember saying we are some of the happiest Black people you will ever meet.
You did.
Running around. Yeah. And it was true at the time. Tech is a unique space, but it's still super flawed. And I regret not being able to talk about that aspect of it. And I realized it when we got into the conversation. All of a sudden they were censoring me, candidly, you know, like you can't, like we had to get our questions pre-approved. There were questions I couldn't ask. I felt super not able to be myself in our conversation. Yeah. And I had never had that experience at the company before. I was like, this is Black History Month and we cannot ask the conversations. I was like, okay, so maybe, you know, things aren't as perfect as I thought. Still a great company, but it was a big eye opener actually having you guys come and speak.
Yeah, and I wish I could say that we take credit for that, but I also don't want to make it seem as if like this is something that we're not accustomed to. Like we know that it's a sensitive topic and it's one on several levels, like even just outside of talking about issues that are specific to Black professionals, just the idea of sort of empowering yourself to be in a position to walk away from a job in and of itself can be seen as an offense. Yes. But you used the word censored, and I was going to ask if you've ever felt censored, but I guess you did because like you felt that. That. How did you cope with that? Because I know I've dealt with feeling censored in an environment where I was also being encouraged to be myself
and be honest and open, and it's a safe space.
Yeah,
but it's not really. Yeah,
but it's not really. Yeah,
yeah. I think I actually asked a question that wasn't approved. And I actually got kind of kicked off of the ERG, like after that interaction with you guys. Wow. So I mean, but I didn't care. That's the freedom of being financially free. It's like, okay, it kind of stung a little bit. Like, wow, I asked a question that I wasn't allowed. And we had the most tame conversation ever.
It was super tame. I'm trying to think of what it could have been.
I was actually disappointed because I was like, I know how much you guys have to share. And I knew we just scratched the surface. And same with the other guest. Yeah. And it was because we were really constrained in what we could ask. And it was information that the community needed. Because if you've seen what's happened with that stock, you have a lot of people who went from millionaires to not, probably because they didn't have the financial advice of like, sell that company stock when it's high, don't keep it all, you know. But we weren't allowed to have that conversation. But yeah, so it sucked. And it opened my eyes to the fact that there is no perfect place. These corporate environments even the great ones. And Zoom is like in the top. I mean, it's an amazing place to work. Like if you're gonna be a Black person in corporate America, I would say go tech. But there was still constraints that made me glad that I was free to make moves when I needed to. But I still had to mind what I said at work, because it was very clear when I stepped out of bounds, I was put in the corner a little bit. So it sucked.
Do you find that the company, or just even if not that specific company, but do you find that some issues or some demographics get a little more kind of wiggle room to discuss their issues? I'm thinking, there's a bunch of different corporate responsibility topics that one can take on. And one of the challenges we would have was that our company was so vocal about some ERG topics.
Yes.
We would support parades and we would dress up and we'd get volunteer time off. And if it was this organization, that was, fine, even though that organization dealt with tough topics too. But when it came specifically to Black issues and Black employees, it was like, whoa. Did you find that they were open across the board and it was just this topic, or was everything kind of watered down?
That's a good question. I can't speak for other groups and if they felt watered down. I can say uniquely as a Black person that I feel like we have more just editing coming, not just from the company, but just even from our elders, like there's so many layers of it that we take with it. And maybe it's my generation because I'm like right on the verge of X and Y. I feel like my younger colleagues are so much more free and empowered to like, just be like, I'm me, accept it. And I'm getting there more and more. But I think a lot of it is our own self-policing, like the people who were telling me what I could and could not say were other people of color who just didn't want to rock the boat too much and lose their privilege and their access. I don't know that I felt it from, I felt like my other colleagues wanted me to be myself, and I didn't feel like it was safe to really say everything. And I don't know that I can't speak for other groups if they feel that same way, but I feel like Black folks, a lot of times we police ourselves. And it's a lot of times the more senior and older Black people at the company who are the ones who are going to be like, don't step out of these bounds, That's just been my experience.
On a personal level, is it heartbreaking for you? Because for me, it was heartbreak. I struggled to try to find the words or the word to describe how it felt. And for me, it just kind of felt like heartbreak because I'd spent so much time and made so much investment in my personal and professional life into these ideas, only to feel as if they weren't nearly as serious as I had originally given them credit for. And then when you also start to sense that policing from people who look like you, who you feel like are supposed to be pushing the agenda, but they aren't, because they also recognize that they might have their hands slapped or have power or influence or even money taken away from them. That's how I felt. I'm curious. It sounds like you felt the same way, but how do you describe it as heartbreak, or do you think about it differently?
Wow, that's deep. Like I think of it as trauma. I guess heartbreak could be another word for it. For me, I think I always give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think a lot of times it's coming from a place of love. Like they're trying to protect you and guide you. Even, my mom was a HR professional in her career. And she would even, like, I wear my hair natural, but before an interview, she'd be like, you're going to straighten your hair, right? Like, it's like that harm from the people who love us and their way of protecting us. And it's like, she wears her hair in an afro. She's never had a relaxer. But for me, she's like, you need to be this way for your success. And for me, like, that's like something I've tried to impact for years of like, I know these people love me and want the best for me, but they're also trying to force me into these boxes of, this is how we know you need to be to succeed. And so I try to think of it as, we're just a community that has been conditioned to not be authentic. And it's going to take really generations to undo that sense of, it's not safe to be yourself, And I don't know if other communities feel that same level of conditioning. But I definitely see it in my world. And again, financial freedom for me is why I think the message you guys have is so important. And for me, just knowing, like, I know I can walk away. So it doesn't hurt. It's not as heartbreaking because I'm like, you don't have my heart. You're literally just, these jobs are a means to achieve my goals. And it hurts, but it's more of a surface hurt because I know my gold is buried elsewhere. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think the more we can get that message out of like, don't put all your eggs in these baskets that aren't, this is not for you. There's maybe in a few generations, it'll be a more level playing field. But I think for anyone, the corporate environment is a kind of a tricky landscape where you're always going to be having to make choices between who you are and what you need to do for business purposes. Yeah. And the quicker you can get free from that, the less painful it is, I think.
Yeah.
I love that because I've never tried to label what I felt. I think I can call what I feel for others heartbreak because to your point, I've moved past it, but I can see so many people are still caught in it. And they're really upset when they get passed over or when they get laid off or when, that thing happens where they get slapped on the hand or whatever it is. They truly take it personally. And my heart breaks for them that happens, that they have that kind of, that they're that porous to this, most of the times, toxic, one-sided environment. Yeah. But for me, it was more like annoyance. It was more anger. And my tolerance for it over time just like lessened and lessened. And like that was my trigger to cash out was just like, it was another reorg. There's nothing particularly bad happening to me. There was nothing I was being asked to do that was outside of my integrity, but the reorg added, 6 additional stakeholders and 4 different meetings. And it was just like, okay, come on. Like this is not a game that I can win, nor does it seem fair that all of my experience gets diminished simply because the company moves some boxes around on a spreadsheet.
Yeah. And I think the fact that once you realize it's not a game you can win, like for me, that was the most freeing point where I'm like, this is like a Ponzi scheme, like they tell you pay your dues. And then when you get to the top, you can there's no winning in this game. The best way to win is to cash out, like to play it, stack your coins, and then quietly exit and build your life on your own terms.
Whenever we have conversations about quitting jobs, someone inevitably feels uncomfortable because in their minds, they love their job. To them, walking away feels like giving up on a dream, a legacy, or even a calling.
But what if instead of viewing quitting negatively, we chose to see it as a crowning achievement? What if instead of climbing the corporate ladder, we aspired to jump off on our own terms and stand on our own 2 feet? How would that affect our career planning? And would people still use the word love when they talked about work if they understood work didn't love them back?
I do want to go back to your 2014, 2015, I think you call it a free-tirement instead of a retirement. Can you talk a little bit about what the struggle was and kind of where you were at that time that made you kind of decide to go back to work and what that experience was like?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of, it caught me by, it was, I think because I was running from something, I was in a job that was just unbearably bad. And so at that time, I was also in a different marriage. So I'm divorced and now remarried. And so there were just so many layers to it. But the main thing was that I didn't plan. I was just running like, I got to get out of this job. And so I drastically reduced my expenses, moved into one of my rentals. So it was kind of, I guess you would call it lean fire. And all my friends were still working. My then husband was still working. Nobody really understood what I was doing. Yeah. I didn't have the education. I had just discovered the FIRE movement. So I think now I have the self-awareness of knowing, you have to be moving towards something and not just running from something. And also having my partner who will also be going through the process with me. Yeah. We have this house in St. Croix that we bought that we are going to be spending a lot of time fixing that up and building a whole secondary life there. Nice. So it's just I'm in a different space. And also it's really hard when you're in your 30s and people are, what was interesting with me is I left my job and then people started contacting me, offering me jobs. And the job I ended up taking was just such a great I'm like, who would turn this down? I'm working from home. It's like 6 figures, super chill, autonomy. And it was a great move. Like, it was a great job for me at that time. So sometimes life just will move you in different directions where I'm like, I didn't want to work in a corporate environment where I had to be in a chair from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. anymore. But I was totally fine to work from home, still make a really great salary, and have a lot of autonomy. Nobody was reporting to me. So that's kind of what lured me back into the workforce. And I'm glad I went back, because now we're able to retire much more comfortably this time around.
Yeah. So how do you describe where you are right now? Because I at least for us, it's one of those weird things. Like, how do you describe where you are? Like, do you consider yourself retired, pre-retired, or you just work? Like, I don't know. I just made that up.
Pre-retired.
Pre-tired.
Pre-tired.
Yeah, I guess I consider myself financially independent, but still working.
Yeah.
And I work by choice right now, and I plan to change that soon. I literally dream of quitting my job daily, even though I have a great job. I just don't want to work anymore. So now I'm just, I guess I'll be free tired again.
So I'm curious about what you said earlier with that you loved your job. And now that you have something to compare it to that I imagine you enjoy as much, would you still call what you felt for your job love versus what you have now? Or would you call it like convenient, easy,
appreciation,
predictable?
You know, love might have been too strong of a word to use. You know, does anyone truly love work? But it's like an existential question.
That is the question.
I would say no, I do not love working. Like, you work because you have to. And, you know, some people, I hear them talk about, you know, you gotta love what you do. You know, you gotta, I'm like, no, look, I need to live. I need a place to live. I need food to eat. So I'm going to go work and I'm going to do my best. So yeah, I won't say I loved my job. Like, I wouldn't have done it for free. There's no way in the world I would have done that for free. But I really love the environment and the people I work with. And it was because of the perspective and contrast to what I had experienced before. So I had a strong appreciation. I think you said that, Julien. I think that's a better word. I had a strong appreciation for that job and the people and the environment that they cultivated, because it's hard to find that.
For me, it's like when I kind of peaked early professionally. So I was at director level in my late 20s, and I had been mistreated so badly in my early corporate career, and everybody was like, just pay your dues, pay your dues. So I was like, okay, I'm going to pay my dues. And I hustled and I worked and I sacrificed. And then I got to director level and I was like, oh, this still really sucks. It's actually worse, because now I'm still getting treated poorly, but then now I have to, it like goes downhill and I have to inflict things on other people that I don't want to. I didn't like the person I was becoming. And for me, that's when I realized, I'm like, oh, there's no getting, it doesn't get better when you get to the top. Not saying director's all that lofty, but you know, at that age, I thought like, oh, once I make it to this level, then it'll be better. And it wasn't better, it was worse. And I was grateful to see that pretty early in my career in terms of an age. So then I could spend the next 10 years really strategizing, okay, how do I set up a life? So I started investing in real estate and things like that, so I wouldn't have to be so reliant on my corporate career. And when it reached a point when it was unbearable, I kind of was able to take a step back and pivot to another role where I was more of an individual contributor and less beholden to like the corporate structure. And that was the way I was able to stay, you know, stacking my coins essentially, but in a less painful way. Because for me, the top of that corporate ladder where I had like a bunch of people, it was torturous for me. I was really miserable. So I think pain opened my eyes where I'm like, I can't do this. Like, this is not winning. I don't want to win this game this way. And it forced me to look for other options.
What made you so confident, or rather, where does that confidence come from that made you say, it doesn't really matter, I'm gonna figure it out?
Yeah. You want to answer that first?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Because my confidence comes from her, honestly. She's like, we could figure this out.
I think the confidence honestly comes from us paying off our debt, right? So when we paid off our debt, we raised our income more than cut our expenses, because we still wanted to live a life, that we wanted to enjoy. So it may not be ideal or traditional, but we did take on extra jobs. But then now we think about, okay, is there extra jobs we can take on that we can do from home now? So the way I see it is, if anything was to ever hit the fan, or and during the pandemic, we saved up a year of emergency savings versus 6 months. And I'm like, would it really take us a year to figure things out? Probably not, but sure, let's have it. So I just think that us going through that process of raising our income and figuring things out of like ways that we can do it that weren't traditional, then we can do that again if things ever happen. Like the world didn't change that much that we can't. But now I probably will be more concerned of how can I do it from working at home? And there's ways to do that, especially in my field as a therapist. There's multiple ways that we can get income. So not worried in that regard. So that's how the confidence builds. I think with us having some type of background of having, going to college and things like that, we have stuff to land back on, if that makes sense. We still have a career, even if we're not in it.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah, that confidence. And then it was even one point of our journey when Janoka was turning down $100 per hour jobs, because I'm like, I'd rather you be home or doing things you want to do versus doing it for somebody else. And it's like, well, it's $100 an hour. I was like, yeah, but can you make that money somewhere else? Back in the couple years ago, that $100 is like, yo, we picked up jobs for $9 an hour when we first started our journey. So that $100 and turning that down.
Still to this day, $100 an hour is good.
She'll get the text and it's like, hey, can you do this? Can you do this therapy? I'm like, it ain't worth it. It ain't worth the headache, $100. So that's what I think, like going back to that journey, that's where the confidence really started from, from us.
Now you're also tag teaming this thing, right? So you've been doing your thing for over a decade now at a high level. But if I'm not mistaken, your husband is in the military and he's either close to retiring or has already retired. Is that correct?
He's close to retiring. So we're working on him. He keeps pushing his date back, but he's 23 years in the military and he'll be retiring. Right now, the date is set for April. And he's someone, again, who sacrificed so much. And now it's really cool to see him kind of coming to the end of the rainbow and being able to take a step back and just enjoy his life. So it definitely helps to have a partner who's on the same page. That helps a lot.
This is probably a hard question to answer, but like, what does that feel like, right? Because we get asked that question all the time, and I never really know how to answer the question. To like be on the same page with your partner, but also to have supreme levels of confidence that like it would take a lot to kind of topple what you built with your partner. But I'm just curious, like, what does it feel like for you and your husband?
I mean, for me, it feels like freedom. For him, I don't think he feels as free. I think he still is concerned about the idea of not having a place to go every day and not having, even though he's getting a pension paycheck. I think that's the part of the reason I wanted to talk to you guys, because it's like it's so outside of the box, right? Like people don't know how to process being early 40s and not having to go to a job anymore. So it's something we're going to work through together. I tried it before. In 2015, I took a step away and kind of did a mini retirement, and it didn't go super well. So I at least know now to prepare better of like, okay, I need to have a game plan and some goals and some purpose. Otherwise I'll get bored. So I'm trying to like plant those seeds in him too, so he doesn't have that same kind of flailing around that I went through. But for the most, I like knowing at any point I can step away. His is a bit more involved because the process of retiring from the military is like a multi-month process. If not, I mean, they tell you it's like a 2-year process for most people. And he's doing his in a more condensed fashion. So his is a bit more tricky, his unlayering,
And there's a lot of identity that comes with military that adds another layer. But I think what we're collectively discovering as a culture, as we go through this labor movement, great resignation, whatever you want to call it, is that quitting isn't always a bad thing. And I think we've been taught so often that quitting means the end of progress. Like there was a anecdote that there are more synonyms for quitting than there are for for staying and enduring and for grit than there are for quitting. Like all of the synonyms for quitting are negative. They're loser, they give up. but all of the synonyms for grit and staying in there are all like positive and heroic.
Interesting.
And so as more people are quitting and finding progress on the other side, I think we'll start to develop more stories and even language to describe what's there when you just let it all go. Like,
yeah,
that's missing from our culture.
It is, because not enough people have done it. But we also have to talk candidly about the fact that when quitting is the destination, there's more to it than that. And I think there is some nuance there of like, you really do have to think about, what do I want my life post corporate or post military, whatever you're leaving, to look like, and do some work. Otherwise, you can be setting yourself up for a disappointment,
Yeah.
So it's tricky. But overall, it's still better to have the option to walk away, and you can always go back. Worst case scenario, you just get another job,
Yeah.
Let's just say this for the record. We don't hate jobs, corporate America, or working, but there's a reason why so many people define it as soul crushing. When it's all said and done, our stance is this: some jobs are good, but all jobs are temporary.
Because of this, we should be careful of assigning so much virtue into systems and institutions that hold so much power over us. Conversely, if your true passion is to be an entrepreneur, we should also be mindful of the realities of that trade-off. When it's all said and done, there are far more than two paths to take to financial freedom, and there are more meaningful rewards to achieve than money.
Now, I find more fulfillment in my work because I have the fortunate opportunity to make money, basically to learn, and which is something I really enjoy doing. I like to understand these concepts and the way the world works and the weirdness of the financial system. Like the fact that I'm like, oh, if I spend an hour or 2 hours today reading up on something, that's technically work. Whereas before I was just doing it for, on my free time on the weekends and nights, trying to, get myself prepped and ready.
I think when I left the job, I had this full speech and I was like, I don't even feel like I'm leaving or quitting. I feel like it was a retirement, because a retirement, they're giving you something and you're giving them something and they're giving you something. You're kind of meeting in the middle at this point. And I gave them 9 years. They gave me the youngest. They gave me everything I wanted in Dallas, and the home and the PTO and all of that stuff. And it just got to the point where I just wasn't fulfilled anymore. And they even said, what else do you want? And they were asking me, and I was like, I don't think it's anything that you guys could do in terms of salary, in terms of time off, in terms of anything. It's just something I need to do for myself.
Whereas before, the work I was doing, it was like I felt like I was working extremely hard to help this organization kind of make the people who lived in this area maintain their level of wealth, essentially.
Yeah.
And there was something kind of unsatisfying about it, because it just wasn't fulfilling. Like, again, I love the people I work with, never had an issue with anyone, but it was like the work I was doing, it became so routine and mundane after a while, to where I just was like, you just lose something, right? Like you lose that bit of, I don't know, fulfillment out of that work, to where it becomes just a job. Whereas now it's like, oh, wow, this is, when I get a message from someone, they say, that really helped me, or I really appreciate that information, or I did this because I listened to this episode. It catches me off guard every time, because I'm like, oh, I'm doing this because I enjoy doing it. But then to see that it actually impacted someone, that is a level of fulfillment that I never got from my day job.
Yeah, there's so much, we have this theory of employment really just being a subsidy in your life. Like there's so much that a corporate office or an office setting or a workplace does on your behalf as an adult, so that you stop doing it. And you kind of, that part of your brain kind of like goes to mush, because it's already being fulfilled by this corporation, this organization, and they spend a lot of money to do that. And you mentioned earlier a couple of things. The first was just being paid to learn, which I think is just like, that should be the new definition of self-employment, because it's a paradigm shift that so many people need, because they're suffering under the weight of constantly paying other people to learn. And so we have these student debt crisis. We have all these people, throwing money at an issue, versus accepting that self-employment is really just a matter of being paid to learn what works and what doesn't. And like, there's a whole lot of what doesn't, but ultimately the stuff that works is your business model.
I don't think entrepreneurship is for everyone,
Agreed.
but I do think everyone should do something outside their jobs, like make money outside their jobs. And I think that's one thing we always preach and always push, because even when we had our cleaning business outside of our job, we still called it a side hustle. We only stopped calling it a side hustle when it's our full-time income. So I think everyone should have something outside their jobs just to kind of get them comfortable with, all right, I can make money outside of my job. It's not as scary as it seems. And then it doesn't have to be, we started with just one to pay one bill. We said you could pay a light bill outside your job. You pay your gym membership, and then it turns into the car note, and then it could eventually turn into your mortgage or your rent payment. So that's one thing I think everyone needs to do. If you're not going to be an entrepreneur, which is totally fine, but at least start something outside your jobs that could potentially build up to something, but you won't know until you at least try it.
Mm-hmm.
So for the person that wants to be like you, the person that, you know, has that great job or had that great job, or, you know, was you, let's say 5 or 6 months ago, what advice do you have for them as they are thinking about or maybe presented with an opportunity to walk away from the comfort and the predictability of that job? What advice do you have for them now that you're on the other side?
You know, I would say that, you know, I kind of think about it in two different ways, and my mind automatically splits it like between the pros and cons of making that transition. So I'll go positive first, be positive. So because I wanted to go straight to don't do it, but no. But on the pro side, it's something about learning to control your time and making choices on your own. And it's something that I wish more of us had the ability to do, especially in American culture. I think you see it more like in European culture, where they're much more likely to have breaks, have vacations, have these long pauses in the day, have shorter work hours. Like it's a completely different concept of work than we have here. So for us, I think it would be so great, because the likelihood of us making any significant changes to work culture is, I think, extremely low. If anything happens, it might be minor. Like we're not doing any. I can't see a 4-day work week popping up like they're trying out, you know, many parts of Europe. It maybe a few companies here might try it out, but it being widespread, I don't know.
I couldn't see it being legislated.
And even still, they'll just redefine, well, like it's 4 days, but it's 10-hour days.
Right.
So, exactly. Yeah, you can work for 4 days. Sure. We're getting 40 out of you, but you can work 4. So I would say if you're thinking about this and it's like a real possibility financially, it makes sense for you, I think you really need to experience that ability to shape your day and see what that's like and see how that changes you. Because for me, I was forced to be a morning person, even though I'm not. And to be able to say, oh, you know what, let me spend my morning kind of getting ready, focusing, waking up, and then start working, still putting in the hours, but putting it in the hours where I would like it to be. It completely changes my concept of the day. And it makes working, you know, however many hours I'm working a day feel a lot less impactful or stressful or straining on my body than when I was forced to work that, you know, 9 hours straight in a day. So for one, that's a huge positive. And also it just is going to make you, I think, a lot more organized, because you have no choice but to be organized.
As our language starts to evolve to allow more of a spectrum with these things. Like if I say I'm an entrepreneur, people assume I'm Sheryl Sandberg. And it's like, I'm not that kind of entrepreneur. Like
you kind of are. I mean, you have to do really great stuff.
I guess I kind of am, but I hate to do that, because like I was telling him the other day, like her legacy is going to be a complicated one, just because the message at the time was daring, but it may or may not have aged well, depending on kind of where you were. When you read it.
Well,
But it also opened the door for a lot of conversations. Like if that book hadn't sold so well, then certainly ours wouldn't have come, you know, 10, 12, 15 years later. So it's a complicated thing. The way that I approach entrepreneurship is based on a newer model than what most people know for small business owners and entrepreneurs. And so it's hard to define, other than like, I'm free. I wake up every day and pretty much decide what I'm going to do. And sometimes the things that I decide make us money. Other times they just make me happy. But either way, I get to decide. Like, that, and it feels like, I think people hear that as flippant because it doesn't seem in reach for so many people. And like trying to explain that that's an option we have in this country. Like, is the hard part. After speaking with Chris, Erica, and the Hartzogs, one thing is clear. We're living through a pivotal moment in time. Some might even call it a revolution. Between advances in technology, progress made in the labor movement, and shifting social and cultural norms, there's a growing appreciation and understanding of how the current system doesn't work for everyone.
And if you don't know how to navigate it all, your career can feel like a trap, which has a negative effect on your finances, your health, and your relationships. So whether you're cashing out to start a business or to live a life of leisure, as we say in our book, the decision is ultimately yours.
I did want to ask you another question, though, because you mentioned something, and it's something that I'm realizing is coming up more and more often, just kind of given our audience and their recent affinity for tech jobs, right? I think the pandemic is one of the things that a lot of folks really fell in love with, and they was like, gotta get me a tech job. And so as someone that has been doing that and living that life for probably more than a decade, as we've been paying attention to compensation, and obviously that being one of the huge draws for why people want to go into tech, the question is always asked around, what do you do if you're offered like company stock? And I'm asking this because you brought it up a little bit.
I'm wondering if that was the forbidden question.
In our question. In your case, you said you did have that, but it sounds as if you understood what was at stake and you diversified. You also kind of alluded to the fact that you had, or that you know some people who didn't do that. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Why you did it, why you think some people didn't do it, and what you would recommend knowing what you know now.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm so glad you asked that question, because this is a topic that we need to talk about more. And the tech companies, amazing comp, amazing stock bonuses and things like that. Again, we'd be in meetings and they would give like $200,000 worth of stock to someone in like a raffle. Like it was crazy.
Wow.
Boom times were like, there was just so much money flowing around. And that same $200,000 worth of stock is probably worth $20,000 right now because of the tech crash. Yeah. So I don't know if it was someone on my team who literally won $200,000 worth of stock in a company meeting. And I don't know, because we all believed in that company and I still believe in that company. I doubt she sold the stock when it was $600 a share and now it's, I don't know what. So my answer to that is we need more voices like JL Collins, like you guys really candidly talking about if you get these great tech jobs, especially if your income, like for me, my corporate income has always kind of just been gravy because I was already financially independent. So for me, the stock, it was almost like a social experiment. Like, oh, I got all this, $170,000 worth of stock, for your first year of employment, whatever. It's a lot of money for most people. But for me, it was always kind of play money of like, I wonder how that's going to end up. And the moral of the story is sell your stock. Like if you are counting on your stock so you get a really great base, right? But then they give you all this stock.
Yeah.
I think what most financial experts will tell you, but it's so quiet, it's not really spoken about, is sell whatever part of your stock is considered your compensation, sell it immediately as soon as it vests, because then you have that cash on hand.
Exactly.
Where it gets tricky is if you see the stock, let's say you join the company and it's at $90 a share, and then your stock vests and it's at $600 a share. I'm sharing kind of real examples here. So then you're like, well, I don't want to sell this. This is going to the moon. And then what happens when it drops down to $20 a share? Yeah. And then you don't have that, it's like this weird, and the last 2 years have been a uniquely volatile period for tech. But I think the rule of thumb that I would recommend, and I'm no financial expert, but just on what I've seen, is if you need that money and you're counting on it as compensation, cash it out when it vests. Yeah. And then anything beyond that, so let's say in your stock compensation, it says you're guaranteed $100,000 worth of stock. And when it comes to vest, it's at $180,000. I would say cash out the 100, let that 80 ride, because that was money you weren't expecting anyways. And if it goes up, it goes up. If it goes down, it goes down. But I think what most people do is they just let all of it ride because you get caught up in the rah-rah of, I believe in this company. And then sometimes you don't end up with 100 and you don't end up with the 8, like you end up with 20 or something.
Exactly.
And this is really what's happening in the market right now. So I think that's why they didn't want us to have those conversations, but they're important conversations to have if you're going to be in tech and if you're counting on that compensation. you really have to be smart and cash out anything that you think you are counting on.
Yeah, I think also, thank you for that. And I would also say, I think, especially for people of color, right, who more often than not
Are the first to go.
are the first ones to even be in a position to have this. They are, in many cases, the only ones in their family that might have amassed that kind of wealth at any point in their family's sort of legacy. And so the risk is significantly high just from a community and a generational wealth perspective. What percentage of people do you think keep it, just based on your own experience and knowing what you know? Like, what percentage of people do you think hold on because they believe that, like, they want to have that story when they're 60 and say, listen, this one thing that I did went to the moon, and now we're set for life, or us and our children's children are set? What percentage of people do you think sort of hold on based on the desire to kind of have that story at the end of it all, versus, what percentage of people do you think maybe followed your advice?
Yeah. And I don't want to take credit like it was my advice, because I definitely got caught holding the bag a bit too, because for me it was kind of play money, the stock money. But just talking to colleagues, only a very few I know cashed out, and it was usually because they had something specific, like they were trying to buy a house, so they cashed out their stock for down payment. I know a handful of people who did that. But I think most people, because you get caught up in the hype of how great things are going, I think and you believe in the company, you're a part of it, Seems to me like most people were letting the majority of it ride. So hopefully they weren't counting on that money for significant portions of their sustenance. And I don't think they were, because we all, you still get a really fair base pay in tech on top, separate from the stock. So I don't think it destroyed anyone, but I do think fortunes were made and lost, especially at some of these big companies that were, just huge during the COVID boom. And then a lot of these stocks just collapsed, dropped. Yeah. I mean, we've all heard the stories of people who lost millions and billions of dollars in a day. Like, I think a lot of people got caught in that.
Yeah. All right. Last question. If you think about a life on an island somewhere, St. Croix, where you are freeing up the bandwidth of your mind that is worried about money and work and emails, is there anything that you think you'll be worried about? Like, is there anything that you'll replace that with? Or are you planning on just like bliss and happiness?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just because of how it went the last time. Yeah. I am learning that maybe I'm not someone who adapts well to just uninterrupted leisure, because immediately when I retired last time, I started volunteering 3 days a week. I was like, I'll be there 9 to 3. Like, I'm such a nerd, like I turned volunteering into a job, and so I have to do work on myself to understand, like, it's okay to just chill, and I'm really trying to wrap my head around that, of like this idea of like, I think about in the olden days how they had aristocrats who just like lived off of their income from their properties. Like people who just like their lives were leisure, and it was almost considered passe, like, oh, you work, whereas now it's like the opposite, where it's like, if you don't work, what is your purpose? Especially as a person, I've chosen not to have biological children, even though I have wonderful bonus children. Like, what is your life's purpose and worth and contribution if you're not actually working, So that's something I've had to work through. But I'm going to give it a shot. Just enjoy the life. And spending time with family and friends, like being really committed to time with my family, time with my friends. Yeah. My nieces, nephews, godchildren, volunteering, sharing what little bit of knowledge I have, like just trying to find other ways to spend my time that don't involve working for someone else.
Yeah. So, and that is work. Like, I look forward to hearing more of us tell those stories of like pouring into nieces, nephews, relatives, just general strangers in ways that Google and courses and Twitter and Instagram captions can't do. Like, that is work. And somebody has to be able to do that. Somebody has to take our lived experiences offline and actually add the nuance and the color and the encouragement that people need to continue to make progress. It took me about 2 years. So I left in 2020, February 2020. And I would say around February this year, and it might have just been because I was frustrated like you. I had read all the books, done all the things, and I was just frustrated that like I hadn't gotten it yet. And even now, there's still moments where it's just like, I'll look at my week and I'll look at the things that we say we want to accomplish. And I'm like, I don't know how it's going to work, even though I own my week. Like I own all 120 hours or whatever. Like I own the week, but I still can't process it. And I think that's the challenge that a lot of people have is like the hard part for me in entrepreneurship is being told that like you have authority of your own life. Like anytime we encounter somebody and we're asking them to question their authority, like what if you could ask for whatever you wanted in negotiations, in life, in your marriage? What if you could design it the way that you wanted to? How would you build it? And the same is true in entrepreneurship. Like the hard part is like, damn, how would I build it? Like if I wanted to have the business that I want to work for and show up for and run up the revenue numbers, like how would I establish it? And it took me 2 years and counting to try to figure out like what that baseline is. Julian's been out. That
makes you feel better.
Yeah, he's been out. I'm like talking like he in jail. He's been home for what, 4 years, 5?
4 years, yeah.
Yeah, and he's got it down. Like he can knock out an assignment or a project in like 3 days. It's fascinating to me, but he has a rhythm that he's figured out.
Sometimes it feels like you're just treading water. Like how would you define or rate like where you are on the parenting scale? And to what extent has parenting affected your life as an entrepreneur?
Parenting scale, I never thought about it. Now, is this me individually or both of us? Because there could be a difference.
You can answer individually.
Okay.
I kind of want to ask you at the same time.
So shoot, like rock, paper, scissors, say shoot?
Yeah, because see, I don't want his answer to affect yours.
And that is what will happen, which is pissing me. I'm actually going to let him go first because he would change his number based off of what I say.
So I'm going to add, yeah.
You let him go first, yeah, because I ain't going to change mine.
I think I would say a 10. I would say a 10. And now we'll see how Alani turns out in a couple years, maybe 8 to 10 years from now, how well we're really doing, which is also something I just think about all the time. So I tweeted this. So I was like, how do you know that you're doing a good job as a parent and you think you're doing everything right? And it could be one turn in their life and everything changes for them. So I would say right now we're like an 8 to 10 range, I would say.
Yeah, I was going for an 8, 9. Yeah, I was going for that.
Boom. I was saying that. So I think we're doing an excellent job as parents. Now we are more privileged than a lot of people we know, a lot of friends, a lot of family. Our parents, Alani's right here with the nanny next door. So we are very privileged. Even when Alani was born, I thank her aunt to this day. Her aunt came down for 3 months and stayed with us out the hospital. Her aunt was here for 3 months. Janoka jokes about she ain't wash a bottle or make food for 3 months for Alani or change a diaper. Like we were very privileged and we had a doula to help us even before we had Alani.
And a birth doula, a birth doula after. So yeah, we put a lot of support in place to make sure that we were able to show up as our best self. And it's funny because I speak to some friends and they're like, if they do it again, what would they would do differently? And they're like, get help earlier. But a lot of times women or just people in general, they're like, well, I just wanted to try it by myself first. I am not one that likes struggle. So I'm like, I don't need to try it. I mean, I feel like everybody in the world has told me what it is. So if there's 3 days that a night doula could be here that I could sleep and I just got to pump and go back to sleep, I'll take it. You know what I mean? So us putting support in place has made a huge difference for us in how it has been as parents. I'll make that very clear because we are down here in Dallas by ourselves, like no family, no grandparents or anything unless they're visiting and stuff like that. So it was very important for us to have things in place to be the best parents we can be.
Yeah, I think that's why we are so focused on telling stories and hearing other people's stories, because for folks in our generation, when you're trying to build something or do something new for your family, even, your family that you came from and the family that you create, like you kind of need these stories because they buck against that age old wisdom that we've been just kind of like running through. It's like, nah, actually you don't have to do that. Or you can ask for more, or you can try something new. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But there was a moment in our book tour when we came to Dallas. I think it was like the fourth stop. I can't remember. It seems like it was a while.
It was
ago.
the last stop.
The last stop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We were in Dallas, and Anthony walked into the room with the baby. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why, but I think I just happened to have Kirsten's mom. I guess she was like in my point of view. And she was like dead set looking at Anthony. And I was just like, all right. I think she was just thinking like,
where's the mom?
Who is this? One, I think she was like, where's the mom? But like, what's the connection? You know, because she was just like in another world. But then later on, when we were kind of debriefing with her, you know, this is just what she does. And she asked the question like, who is that guy with the baby? Because again, she's an older woman. She's not accustomed to seeing like dad out there. Yep. We had a very similar reaction with me in terms of how active and involved I was with our son. And so I was wondering, like, do you guys kind of get those kinds of reactions a lot? And if so, like, what do you do with that? Like, how do you feel about the way that people react to the role that you play as a father?
I feel like we do get that reaction. Like, just for example, if we say at night, right? If she gets up, not now, but if she gets up in the middle of the night, we do every other night. Like one night I'm getting up, other night you're getting up because I have bottles. You don't need to wake me up, right? And so I have some people that they're like, I mean, married couples, they're like, oh no, it's only me. Like the mother is, I'm the only one getting up. And I'm like, but why? Like, what is he not there? Like, being? You know, is he an able being? Like he could help too. I mean, you know, so little things like that. I'm like, at one point, Tony was changing more diapers than I was changing because his thing was, you know, you always have to breastfeed her. So I can't help with that in no capacity, but I can change a diaper. Like I can help in that realm. Things that, you know, like, yeah,
got pretty good at it.
Yeah. So, you know, that I think for us is just like, that's how we will work. That's how we work together as a couple. Like I didn't make this baby on my own. This both of our child here. So that's how we just we discussed it. And we're like, yeah, well, he is doing that. Maybe ask your husband to do this. Maybe, you know, maybe you just never said it. And so they're just like, well, the mom got it under control. Cause that happens too. Like, we're just like, all right, I got it. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And so the dad is just like, all right, she handling it. So I'll hop in when I need to. So
yeah, that was something that our doula told us too, because I was feeling so helpless during the child, not the process, but in general, I was like, how do I help once we're through this? And she was like, do everything that if there's something that you could do that she could do as well, you do that task. There's gonna be things that you can't even help with, you can't understand, and you don't even know why. She's like, do everything else. I was like, okay, well, washing the bottles, doing changing the diapers, you know, making dinner, like that type of stuff is something that I said, all right, I can take that off her plate. And even another thing is like, even when we're traveling together, it's not just about, you know, me being a dad. We'll be traveling with Alani and people are like, oh, I never travel with my kid. It's like, oh, I would never bring my kid on the flight. And it's like, why not? It's like, have you ever thought about it? Have you ever tried? And we get this a lot. Like Alani's been on, I don't know how many 20 something flights now. And every single time, like, oh my God, this is her first flight. You know, oh, I can never bring my kids. Like, why wouldn't you want your kids to experience, even though she's still young, but why wouldn't you want your kids to experience what you're experiencing in life?
And I want to give you guys your flowers for doing that, like coming and speaking out and like sharing your story, because it's huge, you know, to have now there's a book on how to do this. So it'll help maybe the next generation go through these steps a bit easier.
That's our hope.
That is the hope.
That's our hope.
Yeah.
And honestly, the dream is that the book becomes obsolete, right? I want there to be no need for the book. I want there to be no need for us to have to call out the difference in experiences between people like us versus some of our peers, right? So that's the long-term hope. Until then, we'll do our part to keep beating the drum, and hopefully people hear and abide by it. But even if they don't, I mean, you know, honestly, success for us is just, we've said it. It's on record. And
we've got stories and success cases.
And that's really all we kind of wanted to do. So.
That was on the pros. Now to my favorite area, the con side of this.
Don't do it.
Don't do it, because I think there's a lot of, for good reason, there's a lot of hate around day jobs, right? There's a big movement of people being like, forget this job. I'm doing it on my own, which a lot of companies are abusing people. They're taking advantage of you. They're making you work a lot of hours. They're not paying you what you should be paid. And they make it seem like you asking for the money you deserve is the reason why we have inflation. Like, they want to throw it back at the people for feeling like, what, stuff is too expensive. We need to be paid a fair wage to compensate for that. You all can take a little bit less in profit. You don't need to be making record profits every year. How about you take a little bit off and give it to me? But there are those situations. But there's also the fact that there's something to say about a solid job with good health benefits, good coworkers, and a boss who appreciates you. And if you happen to be in one of those situations where you happen to get all three of those things, and I was very fortunate to find myself in a job like that with a boss who I give her all the credit. She cultivated an amazing work environment because it wasn't the whole organization. Not every department worked like that.
Yeah.
She made it a point to treat people right. If she's like, if you work for me and you do what I asked you to do, I'm going to treat you all great. I'm going to make sure you get your raises. I'm going to make sure you get the time off you need. She took care of everybody. And it was amazing. And I hold on to that. And that's how I want to treat people. If I get in a position where I hire people on, I'm going to treat them the way that she treated me and everyone else in the office. And so if you find yourself in one of those situations, I said, there's nothing wrong with, like you said, Kiersten, like splitting your time, doing that. Hey, I can run a business and also have a day job at the same time. As long as it's not killing your soul and crushing you and taking every minute of your free time, I think there's nothing wrong with doing that until you feel like, I can't do this anymore. So I say, take your time. There's no rush. Don't listen to these LLC people on the internet. Do what you got to do. Do what works for you. But it is an amazing experience, but not something that you have to do.
Yes. I love that.
That's my director board.
Oh.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Cashing Out the Podcast. To see more videos like this, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and be sure to turn on your notifications. To get your copy of Cashing Out the book, visit Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore, or download the audiobook on Audible.